The spark. The origins of World War III can be traced back to the simmering tensions in the South China Sea. For years, China had been asserting its claims over the resource-rich waters, constructing artificial islands and militarizing the region. The United States, along with its allies, had been conducting freedom of navigation operations to challenge these claims, leading to frequent standoffs. In 2026, an incident occurred that would tip the delicate balance into outright conflict. On a stormy night in March 2026, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, was conducting a routine patrol in the South China Sea when it collided with the Chinese destroyer CNS Changsha. The collision resulted in a fire aboard the Roosevelt, causing the deaths of over 100 sailors and the sinking of the Changsha. Both sides accused each other of reckless maneuvers and deliberate aggression. This incident was widely publicized, with graphic images of the burning ships and wounded sailors flooding the media. The international community was shocked, but rather than calming the situation, the incident inflamed nationalistic fervor in both countries. Protests erupted in Beijing and Washington, with citizens demanding retribution. Diplomatic channels were quickly overwhelmed with accusations and counter-accusations. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session, but the meeting ended in acrimony as China and the United States vetoed each other's resolutions. As the rhetoric intensified, both nations began mobilizing their military forces. The U.S. deployed additional aircraft carriers and submarines to the Pacific, while China conducted massive naval and air exercises. The situation was further complicated by the involvement of regional powers such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia, who had their own interests and alliances to consider. The world was on edge, and the spark had been lit. The economic war. With diplomacy failing, the conflict quickly expanded into the economic realm. The United States, leveraging its influence over global financial systems, imposed severe economic sanctions on China. These sanctions targeted key sectors such as technology, finance, and manufacturing, aiming to cripple China's economic growth and military capabilities. The U.S. also pressured its allies to follow suit, leading to a coordinated international effort to isolate China economically. In response, China utilized its control over rare earth elements, essential for the production of electronics and military hardware, as a weapon. Beijing announced export restrictions on these materials, causing immediate disruptions in global supply chains. The prices of consumer electronics, electric vehicles, and advanced weaponry skyrocketed, and companies worldwide faced severe shortages. The economic war had profound effects on the global economy. Stock markets plummeted, and major economies slipped into recession. Trade wars erupted as countries imposed tariffs and counter-tariffs, leading to a significant decline in international trade. Inflation soared, and unemployment rates hit record highs. The economic hardships fueled social unrest and nationalistic sentiments, further polarizing societies. In China, the government responded to the sanctions by promoting self-reliance and accelerating its Made in China 2025 initiative, aiming to reduce dependence on foreign technology. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies ramped up efforts to develop alternative sources of rare earth elements and diversify their supply chains. The economic war had set the stage for a prolonged and multifaceted conflict. The cyber onslaught. As the economic war raged on, a new front opened in cyberspace. Cyber warfare had been an integral part of military strategies for years, but the scale and intensity of the attacks during World War III were unprecedented. State-sponsored hackers from both sides launched coordinated cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, financial institutions, and communication networks. In early 2028, a massive cyber attack crippled the power grid in several major U.S. cities, causing widespread blackouts. Hospitals, transportation systems, and emergency services were severely impacted, leading to chaos and panic among the population. The U.S. government attributed the attack to Chinese hackers, who denied any involvement and accused the U.S. of fabricating evidence. In retaliation, the U.S. launched a series of cyber attacks targeting China's financial sector and communication networks. The People's Bank of China suffered a major breach, resulting in the theft of billions of yuan and the disruption of financial transactions. Chinese social media platforms and news outlets were also targeted, spreading false information and creating confusion among the public. The cyber onslaught was not limited to the US and China. Allies on both sides faced similar attacks, as hackers targeted NATO's command and control systems, European financial markets, and the communication networks of Asian countries allied with the US. Cyber warfare became a global threat, with nations investing heavily in cyber defense and offensive capabilities. The impact of the cyber attacks was profound. Public trust in digital systems eroded, leading to a resurgence in the use of analog and manual methods for critical operations. Governments and corporations prioritized cybersecurity, but the rapid evolution of cyber threats made it a continuous and costly battle. Cyberspace had become a crucial battleground, with far-reaching implications for the war and beyond. The first shots. The simmering tensions and hostilities finally erupted into open warfare in 2029 with the invasion of Taiwan. For decades, China had claimed Taiwan as its own, but the island nation had maintained its independence with the support of the United States and its allies. In January 2029, China launched a surprise invasion, deploying thousands of troops, aircraft, and naval vessels in a coordinated assault on the island. The invasion was swift and brutal. Chinese forces bombarded key military installations and infrastructure, while amphibious units landed on Taiwan's shores. The Taiwanese military, though well prepared, was overwhelmed by the sheer scale and ferocity of the attack. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, leading to significant casualties and a humanitarian crisis. The United States, bound by its commitment to defend Taiwan, immediately responded. U.S. aircraft carriers and submarines engaged Chinese naval forces in the Taiwan Strait, leading to intense naval and aerial battles. Japan and Australia also joined the conflict, providing military support and conducting operations in the region. The first shots of World War III had been fired, and the conflict quickly spread beyond the Taiwan Strait. Skirmishes erupted in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Korean Peninsula. North Korea, allied with China, conducted missile tests and provocations against South Korea and Japan. Russia, aligning with China, increased its military presence in Eastern Europe and the Arctic, further escalating tensions. The war had become a global conflict, drawing in nations from every corner of the world. The new alliances. As the conflict expanded, new alliances formed, reshaping the geopolitical landscape. The NATO alliance, already strained by internal divisions and differing priorities, found new cohesion in the face of a common threat. The United States led efforts to incorporate new member states from Asia and the Pacific, including Japan, South Korea, and Australia. These new members brought additional military capabilities and strategic locations, strengthening NATO's global reach. China, on the other hand, solidified its alliances with Russia, Iran, and several African and Latin American countries. These alliances were based on mutual interests and shared opposition to Western influence. Russia provided significant military support, while Iran offered strategic advantages in the Middle East. African and Latin American allies contributed resources and manpower, creating a diverse coalition. These alliances were not without challenges. NATO members had to navigate differing priorities and regional conflicts, while China's allies faced internal dissent and economic difficulties. However, the alliances brought together a vast array of resources and capabilities, shaping the strategic landscape of the war. Diplomatic efforts continued as neutral countries and international organizations attempted to mediate and de-escalate the conflict. However, the deep-rooted mistrust and conflicting interests of the warring parties made diplomacy a daunting task. The new alliances set the stage for a prolonged and complex war, with no clear end in sight. The battle for space. In 2031, the conflict extended into a new frontier, space. Recognizing the strategic importance of satellites for communication, navigation, and surveillance, both sides targeted each other's space assets. The battle for space became a critical aspect of the war, with far-reaching implications for military operations and civilian life. China and Russia, leveraging their advanced space capabilities, launched a series of anti-satellite (ASAT) missiles, destroying several U.S. and Allied satellites. The debris from these destroyed satellites created a hazardous environment in low Earth orbit, complicating further space operations. In response, the United States and its allies deployed their own ASAT weapons, targeting Chinese and Russian satellites. The destruction of satellites led to significant disruptions in communication and navigation systems. Military operations were hampered by the loss of real-time intelligence and coordination, while civilian activities reliant on GPS and satellite communication were severely affected. The proliferation of space debris also posed long-term risks, potentially rendering certain orbits unusable for decades. To mitigate the impact, both sides accelerated the development of space-based defenses and alternative technologies. Efforts were made to deploy smaller, more resilient satellite constellations and ground-based systems to compensate for the losses. Space became a contested domain, with continuous advancements and countermeasures shaping the dynamics of the war. The battle for space underscored the interconnectedness of modern warfare, where victories and losses in one domain could significantly influence outcomes in others. It also highlighted the vulnerability of space infrastructure and the need for international cooperation to address the growing challenges of space security and sustainability. The bioterror strikes. In a shocking escalation of the conflict, bioterrorism emerged as a new and terrifying threat in 2032. Utilizing advancements in genetic engineering, state-sponsored and rogue actors developed and unleashed genetically modified viruses and bacteria in major cities worldwide. These bioterror strikes caused widespread panic, casualties, and profound disruptions to daily life. The first major attack occurred in New York City, where a genetically engineered virus was released in the subway system. The virus spread rapidly, overwhelming hospitals and causing thousands of deaths within weeks. The origins of the attack were unclear, with both sides accusing each other of deploying the bioweapon. Similar attacks soon followed in London, Beijing, Moscow, and other major cities, spreading fear and chaos. Public health systems, already strained by the war, struggled to contain and treat the outbreaks. Quarantines, travel restrictions, and lockdowns became commonplace, further disrupting economies and daily life. The psychological impact on populations was severe, with trust in government and public institutions eroding as people demanded answers and protection. The use of bioterrorism brought ethical and strategic dilemmas to the forefront. Nations grappled with the challenges of detecting and defending against invisible and evolving threats. Efforts to develop vaccines and treatments were accelerated, but the rapid mutation of the pathogens made it a continuous and daunting task. International cooperation on bioterrorism and public health became a critical priority, with countries setting aside differences to address the common threat. However, the mistrust and suspicion bred by the war complicated these efforts, leading to fragmented and often ineffective responses. The bioterror strikes added a new and horrifying dimension to the conflict, highlighting the dark potential of modern biotechnology. The nuclear standoff. The specter of nuclear war loomed large over the conflict, particularly in 2033, when a severe crisis erupted on the Korean peninsula. North Korea, emboldened by its alliances with China and Russia, conducted a series of provocative missile tests, showcasing new intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. This provocation brought the world to the brink of a nuclear standoff. The United States and its allies responded by increasing their military presence in the region and conducting joint exercises with South Korea and Japan. Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation were intensified, but North Korea's aggressive posturing and rhetoric made negotiations challenging. The risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation was high. The crisis peaked when North Korea announced the deployment of nuclear-armed ICBMs, prompting the U.S. to place its nuclear forces on high alert. The world held its breath as diplomatic channels worked overtime to prevent a nuclear exchange. After weeks of tense negotiations, a fragile agreement was reached, with North Korea agreeing to a temporary freeze on its missile tests in exchange for humanitarian aid and security assurances. The nuclear standoff underscored the fragile balance of power and the devastating potential of nuclear weapons. It highlighted the importance of deterrence and the need for robust communication and crisis management mechanisms to prevent escalation. The crisis also reinforced the urgency of addressing nuclear proliferation and strengthening international arms control agreements. Despite the temporary resolution, the threat of nuclear conflict remained ever present, shaping military strategies and international relations. The world had come perilously close to a nuclear catastrophe, a sobering reminder of the stakes involved in World War III. The humanitarian crisis. As the war dragged on, its humanitarian toll became increasingly severe. By 2034, conflicts in the Middle East, Africa, and other volatile regions had intensified, leading to massive refugee flows and humanitarian crises. Millions of people were displaced, seeking refuge from the violence and devastation that engulfed their homelands. In the Middle East, ongoing conflicts in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq were exacerbated by the global war. Proxy battles and direct interventions by major powers turned these countries into battlegrounds. Civilians bore the brunt of the violence, facing airstrikes, bombings, and ground assaults. Refugee camps swelled beyond capacity, and international aid organizations struggled to provide basic necessities. In Africa, wars over resources and ethnic tensions were inflamed by the global conflict. Nations such as Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo saw increased fighting, displacing millions. The fragile infrastructure in many African countries collapsed under the strain, leading to food and water shortages, disease outbreaks, and widespread suffering. The humanitarian crisis was not confined to war zones. The economic downturn and social unrest in many parts of the world created new waves of refugees and internally displaced persons. Europe, already dealing with its own economic challenges, faced a massive influx of refugees, straining social services and fueling xenophobia and political tensions. International aid efforts were hampered by the ongoing conflict. Supply chains were disrupted, and humanitarian workers often became targets. Despite these challenges, global solidarity efforts persisted, with non-governmental organizations, volunteers, and local communities stepping up to provide aid and support. The human cost of the war was staggering. Families were torn apart, children were orphaned, and entire communities were devastated. The war's legacy would be felt for generations, with deep scars left on the social fabric of many nations. The humanitarian crisis underscored the urgent need for a resolution to the conflict and a renewed commitment to peace and human dignity. The technological arms race. The protracted conflict spurred rapid advancements in military technology. By 2035, both sides had made significant strides in developing new weapons and systems, seeking any edge to gain superiority on the battlefield. The technological arms race led to innovations in areas such as autonomous drones, AI-powered combat systems, and enhanced cyber capabilities. Autonomous drones became a staple of modern warfare. These drones, equipped with advanced AI and machine learning algorithms, could conduct surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeted strikes with minimal human intervention. Swarms of drones were deployed in coordinated attacks, overwhelming enemy defenses and inflicting significant damage. AI-powered combat systems transformed the nature of ground warfare. Autonomous tanks, robotic infantry units, and AI-driven command and control systems enhanced the effectiveness and efficiency of military operations. These systems could analyze vast amounts of data in real time, making strategic and tactical decisions faster than human counterparts. Cyber capabilities continued to evolve, with both sides developing sophisticated tools for offense and defense. Quantum computing breakthroughs allowed for the rapid decryption of enemy communications and the development of more secure encryption methods. Cyber attacks became more precise and targeted, focusing on critical infrastructure and military assets. Biotechnology also played a significant role in the arms race. Advances in genetic engineering and synthetic biology led to the development of new bioweapons and countermeasures. These technologies, while offering powerful capabilities, also raised ethical concerns and risks of unintended consequences. The rapid pace of technological innovation brought new challenges and dilemmas. The integration of AI and autonomous systems raised questions about accountability and the role of human judgment in warfare. The use of bioweapons and genetic engineering posed risks of uncontrollable and unpredictable outcomes. The arms race also created an environment of continuous escalation, with each side striving to outdo the other. The technological arms race reshaped the battlefield and the strategies employed by the warring parties. It highlighted the transformative impact of technology on warfare and the need for ethical considerations and international regulations to govern its use. The advancements made during the war would have lasting implications for future conflicts and global security. The propaganda war. As the war continued, the battle for hearts and minds intensified. Propaganda and information warfare reached new heights, with both sides employing sophisticated techniques to influence public opinion and undermine each other's credibility. The propaganda war became a crucial aspect of the conflict, shaping perceptions and narratives on a global scale. Deepfake technology and AI-generated content were used extensively to create convincing but false videos and images. These deepfakes were deployed to spread disinformation, discredit leaders, and incite unrest. Social media platforms became battlegrounds, with armies of bots and trolls amplifying propaganda and manipulating conversations. Psychological operations, PSYOPs, targeted populations and military personnel, aiming to weaken morale and sow discord. False flag operations and fabricated news stories created confusion and mistrust. The line between truth and fiction blurred, making it difficult for people to discern reality from manipulation. State-controlled media outlets played a central role in the propaganda efforts. In China and Russia, the government tightly controlled the narrative, promoting patriotic themes and demonizing the enemy. In the United States and its allies, media outlets, though more diverse, were not immune to bias and manipulation, often reflecting the polarization and divisions within their societies. Public trust in media and information sources declined sharply. People became more skeptical and cynical, questioning the authenticity of news and official statements. This erosion of trust had profound implications for social cohesion and the functioning of democratic institutions. Efforts to counter disinformation and propaganda were met with mixed success. Fact-checking organizations, independent media, and digital literacy programs played important roles, but the sheer volume and sophistication of the disinformation made it a daunting task. The propaganda war highlighted the need for robust media ethics, transparency, and public education to build resilience against manipulation. The propaganda war demonstrated the power of information in shaping the course of conflicts and the importance of maintaining trust and integrity in communication. It also underscored the ethical challenges posed by new technologies and the need for international cooperation to address the threats posed by disinformation and psychological warfare. The energy crisis. The war's impact on global energy markets led to a severe energy crisis by 2037. With traditional energy supply lines disrupted by the conflict, countries faced significant shortages of oil, gas, and other essential fuels. The crisis had far-reaching consequences, affecting economies, societies, and the conduct of the war itself. Europe was particularly hard hit. The disruption of energy supplies from Russia and the Middle East led to widespread blackouts and economic downturns. Industries reliant on stable energy supplies struggled to maintain operations, leading to layoffs and economic contraction. The crisis also fueled social unrest, with protests and strikes becoming common. In response to the energy crisis, nations accelerated investments in renewable energy and alternative technologies. Solar, wind, and nuclear power saw significant growth as countries sought to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels and ensure energy security. Innovations in energy storage and efficiency also became critical priorities. The crisis prompted a revaluation of energy policies and strategies. Governments implemented measures to diversify energy sources, improve energy efficiency, and build resilient infrastructure. The transition to renewable energy was not without challenges, including technological limitations, environmental concerns, and the need for substantial investments. The energy crisis also had geopolitical implications. Countries with abundant renewable resources, such as solar-rich regions, gained strategic importance. New alliances and partnerships formed around energy cooperation, reshaping the global energy landscape. The crisis highlighted the interconnectedness of energy security and national security, influencing military strategies and international relations. The impact of the energy crisis extended beyond the battlefield. It accelerated the global shift towards sustainable energy and underscored the vulnerabilities of traditional energy systems. The crisis demonstrated the need for a comprehensive and coordinated approach to energy security, sustainability, and resilience in the face of global challenges. The climate catastrophe. The ongoing war exacerbated the climate crisis, pushing the planet towards a climate catastrophe by 2038. Military activities, environmental destruction, and the collapse of international climate agreements contributed to the worsening of global climate conditions. The effects were felt worldwide, with devastating consequences for ecosystems and human populations. Intensified military operations led to the destruction of forests, pollution of waterways, and the release of greenhouse gases. The use of chemical and biological weapons had long-term environmental impacts, contaminating soil and water sources. The disruption of global supply chains and economic instability hampered efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Climate-related disasters, such as hurricanes, droughts, and wildfires, became more frequent and severe. Coastal cities faced increased flooding and storm surges, displacing millions and causing billions in damages. Agricultural productivity declined, leading to food shortages and increased competition for resources. The war also hindered international cooperation on climate issues. The breakdown of diplomatic relations and the focus on military priorities sidelined climate initiatives. The collapse of global climate agreements and funding mechanisms further stalled progress on emissions reductions and climate adaptation. In response to the climate catastrophe, grassroots movements and local communities took action to address the crisis. Innovative solutions and resilient practices emerged, but the scale of the challenge required coordinated and sustained efforts at the global level. The climate crisis underscored the interconnectedness of environmental, economic, and security issues, highlighting the need for holistic and integrated approaches. The climate catastrophe added a new and urgent dimension to the conflict, impacting strategic decisions and the overall trajectory of the war. It also served as a stark reminder of the long-term consequences of human actions and the imperative of sustainable development and environmental stewardship. The quest for peace. By 2039, the devastating toll of the war had created a strong desire for peace. Exhausted by years of conflict and crises, the international community intensified efforts to negotiate a comprehensive peace agreement. Diplomatic channels were reopened, and high-level negotiations began, with the aim of ending the war and addressing its underlying causes. The peace process was complex and fraught with challenges. Mistrust and grievances ran deep, and reconciling the interests of the warring parties required significant compromises. Mediators from neutral countries and international organizations played crucial roles in facilitating dialogue and building consensus. Key issues on the negotiation table included territorial disputes, security guarantees, economic reconstruction, and humanitarian relief. The involvement of regional powers and non-state actors added layers of complexity to the negotiations. Despite the difficulties, there was a growing recognition that a sustainable peace required addressing not only the immediate conflict but also the broader systemic issues that had fueled it. Civil society and grassroots movements played vital roles in advocating for peace and reconciliation. Their efforts helped build public support for the peace process and create pressure on political leaders to pursue diplomatic solutions. The quest for peace also sparked discussions on reforms in international governance, aimed at preventing future conflicts and promoting global stability. The peace negotiations marked a turning point in the conflict. While the road to a final agreement was long and uncertain, the commitment to dialogue and cooperation signaled a possible end to the years of war and devastation. The quest for peace highlighted the resilience and determination of humanity to overcome adversity and build a better future. The legacy of World War III. The end of World War III in 2040 brought a sense of relief but also a profound recognition of the challenges ahead. The war had left deep scars on the world, reshaping geopolitical dynamics, economies, societies, and the environment. The legacy of the war would be felt for generations, influencing the course of history and the collective consciousness of humanity. The geopolitical landscape was transformed, with new alliances and power structures emerging from the conflict. The balance of power had shifted, and nations faced the task of rebuilding trust and cooperation in a fragmented world. The war underscored the importance of diplomacy, multilateralism, and the need for robust international institutions to address global challenges. Economically, the war had caused widespread destruction and disruption. Rebuilding economies and restoring trade networks required massive investments and international collaboration. The shift towards sustainable development and resilient infrastructure became central to recovery efforts, with a focus on addressing the root causes of conflict and promoting inclusive growth. Societally, the war had profound impacts on populations worldwide. The loss of life, displacement, and social upheaval left deep wounds that needed healing. Efforts to promote reconciliation, justice, and human rights were essential for building lasting peace. The war also highlighted the importance of social cohesion, resilience, and the role of communities in fostering stability and development. Environmentally, the war had accelerated the climate crisis and caused significant ecological damage. Addressing the environmental impacts required coordinated global action and a renewed commitment to sustainability. The lessons learned from the war underscored the interconnectedness of human and environmental security and the need for integrated approaches to global challenges. The legacy of World War III was a complex tapestry of loss, resilience, and hope. It served as a stark reminder of the costs of conflict and the imperative of working towards a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. The war's end marked a new beginning, with humanity facing the task of rebuilding and reimagining a future shaped by the lessons of the past. The post-war reconstruction. The end of World War III marked the beginning of an extensive and ambitious period of reconstruction. By 2041, the international community was mobilizing resources and expertise to rebuild devastated cities, restore critical infrastructure, and revitalize economies. The reconstruction efforts were massive in scale, involving coordination among governments, international organizations, and the private sector. The rebuilding of war-torn regions required addressing both physical and social infrastructure. Cities such as Taipei, Seoul, and parts of Eastern Europe, which had been heavily damaged, saw concerted efforts to reconstruct homes, hospitals, schools, and transportation networks. Advanced construction technologies, including 3D printing and modular building systems, were employed to expedite the process and ensure sustainability. Economic recovery was a critical component of post-war reconstruction. Nations prioritized restoring industries, trade routes, and financial systems disrupted by the war. International financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund played key roles in providing loans and aid packages to support recovery efforts. Economic policies focused on creating jobs, fostering innovation, and promoting equitable growth. Social reconstruction involved healing the deep psychological and social wounds inflicted by the war. Programs to support mental health, education, and social cohesion were implemented to help individuals and communities recover from trauma. Truth and reconciliation commissions were established in several countries to address war crimes, promote justice, and facilitate healing and forgiveness. Environmental restoration was also a priority. Efforts to clean up polluted areas, reforest destroyed ecosystems, and restore biodiversity were critical for ensuring long-term sustainability. The war had highlighted the fragility of the environment, prompting a renewed focus on conservation and sustainable development practices. The post-war reconstruction period was marked by both challenges and opportunities. While the task of rebuilding was immense, it also offered a chance to create more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable societies. The lessons learned from the war informed policies and practices, aiming to prevent future conflicts and promote global stability and prosperity. The rise of global governance. The devastation and complexity of World War III underscored the need for stronger global governance mechanisms to address international conflicts and crises. By 2043, significant reforms were underway to enhance the effectiveness and legitimacy of international institutions, paving the way for a new era of global cooperation. The United Nations, often criticized for its inefficacy during the war, underwent substantial restructuring. Reforms aimed at making the UN more representative and capable of addressing global challenges were implemented. The Security Council was expanded to include more permanent members, reflecting the new geopolitical realities. Decision-making processes were streamlined to allow for quicker and more decisive action. A new international body, the Global Peace and Security Organization, GPSO, was established to complement the UN. The GPSO focused on conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict reconstruction. It brought together military, economic, and humanitarian expertise to provide a holistic approach to peace and security. The GPSO also played a key role in coordinating international efforts to address non-traditional security threats such as cyber warfare, bioterrorism, and climate change. The International Court of Justice and other judicial bodies were strengthened to ensure accountability for war crimes and violations of international law. New treaties and agreements were negotiated to address emerging threats and promote disarmament, non-proliferation, and human rights. The establishment of a global environmental agency emphasized the interconnectedness of security, development, and environmental sustainability. Civil society and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, were recognized as essential partners in global governance. Their role in advocacy, monitoring, and implementation of international agreements was institutionalized, providing a voice for diverse stakeholders and enhancing transparency and accountability. The rise of global governance reflected a recognition that no single nation could address the complex and interconnected challenges of the 21st century alone. The new framework aimed to foster a more cooperative, equitable, and sustainable international order, learning from the failures and successes of the past. The technological renaissance. The technological innovations driven by the war transitioned into a peacetime renaissance by 2045, transforming industries, economies, and societies. The rapid advancements made during the conflict in areas such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy found new applications in civilian life, driving progress and prosperity. AI and automation revolutionized various sectors. In healthcare, AI-powered diagnostics and treatment planning improved patient outcomes and reduced costs. Autonomous vehicles and smart infrastructure transformed transportation, enhancing safety and efficiency. The integration of AI in education personalized learning experiences, making education more accessible and effective. Biotechnology saw significant breakthroughs. Advances in genetic engineering and synthetic biology led to new treatments for diseases, improved agricultural productivity, and innovative solutions for environmental challenges. The war had accelerated research in these areas, and peacetime applications brought profound benefits to humanity. The energy sector underwent a major transformation. Investments in renewable energy technologies during the war paid off, leading to widespread adoption of solar, wind, and advanced nuclear power. Energy storage solutions improved, making renewable energy more reliable and reducing dependence on fossil fuels. Smart grids and decentralized energy systems enhanced energy security and resilience. The technological renaissance also addressed some of the critical challenges exposed by the war. Innovations in cybersecurity protected critical infrastructure and data from increasingly sophisticated threats. Advanced materials and manufacturing techniques enabled the rebuilding of more resilient and sustainable infrastructure. Environmental technologies helped mitigate the impacts of climate change and restore ecosystems. This period of technological advancement brought about significant economic growth and improved quality of life. However, it also raised new ethical and social questions. Issues such as data privacy, the digital divide, and the impact of automation on employment required careful consideration and regulation. The challenge was to ensure that the benefits of technological progress were widely shared and that potential risks were managed responsibly. The technological renaissance highlighted the potential of human ingenuity and innovation to overcome challenges and create a better future. It emphasized the importance of investing in research and development, fostering creativity, and promoting inclusive and ethical use of technology. The cultural revival. The aftermath of World War III saw a profound cultural revival by 2047. The war had brought immense suffering, but it also inspired a renewed appreciation for culture, arts, and human connections. This period was characterized by a flourishing of creative expression, intercultural dialogue, and a reimagining of identity and community. Artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers explored themes of resilience, hope, and reconciliation. The war and its aftermath provided rich material for artistic expression, leading to powerful works that resonated with global audiences. Art became a means of processing collective trauma, fostering understanding, and envisioning a better future. Cultural exchanges and collaborations increased, facilitated by advances in communication technology. Virtual and augmented reality platforms allowed people from different parts of the world to experience and participate in each other's cultural practices. This interconnectedness fostered empathy, solidarity, and a sense of global citizenship. Education systems placed greater emphasis on the humanities and social sciences, recognizing the importance of cultural literacy and critical thinking in a complex world. Programs that promoted intercultural understanding, ethical reasoning, and civic engagement became integral to curricula at all levels of education. Traditional and indigenous cultures experienced a revival, as people sought to reconnect with their roots and heritage. Efforts to preserve and promote linguistic and cultural diversity gained momentum, supported by both local communities and international organizations. This cultural revival celebrated the richness of human diversity and the shared values that unite humanity. The cultural revival also extended to architecture, urban planning, and public spaces. Cities and towns rebuilt after the war incorporated elements that reflected cultural heritage and promoted community interaction. Public art, cultural centers, and inclusive design principles transformed urban landscapes, creating vibrant and cohesive communities. This period of cultural renewal emphasized the power of creativity, empathy, and human connection. It underscored the role of culture in healing and rebuilding societies, and the importance of nurturing cultural expression and diversity as essential components of a peaceful and prosperous world. The New Dawn. By 2050, the world had emerged from the shadows of World War III into a new dawn of hope, resilience, and opportunity. The lessons learned from the conflict had profoundly shaped the global consciousness, leading to a renewed commitment to peace, justice, and sustainable development. This milestone marked the beginning of a new era, characterized by unprecedented cooperation and progress. The scars of the war, both physical and psychological, were still present, but humanity's capacity for resilience and recovery had been proven. The collective efforts to rebuild and reimagine societies had created a foundation for a brighter future. The challenges ahead were many, but the spirit of collaboration and innovation fostered during the post-war years provided a strong basis for addressing them. Global governance structures were more robust and inclusive, capable of addressing international conflicts and crises effectively. The reforms implemented in the aftermath of the war had strengthened international institutions, promoting transparency, accountability, and cooperation. The Global Peace and Security Organization and the reformed United Nations played central roles in maintaining peace and security. Economic systems had undergone significant transformation, with a focus on sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. Investments in renewable energy, technology, and infrastructure had spurred economic growth and created new opportunities. Efforts to address inequality and promote social justice were integral to economic policies, fostering a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. Technological advancements continued to drive progress, but with a greater emphasis on ethical considerations and societal benefits. Innovations in AI, biotechnology, and other fields were harnessed to solve global challenges and improve quality of life. The technological renaissance had shown the potential of human ingenuity, and this spirit of innovation persisted. Culturally, the world was more interconnected and enriched by diversity. The cultural revival had fostered a deeper appreciation for different perspectives and traditions, promoting empathy and solidarity. Education systems emphasized critical thinking, creativity, and intercultural understanding, preparing future generations to navigate a complex and interconnected world. Environmentally, the world was on a more sustainable path. The energy transition, conservation efforts, and technological innovations had mitigated some of the worst impacts of climate change. The global community recognized the interconnectedness of human and environmental health, fostering a commitment to sustainable development and stewardship of the planet. The New Dawn represented a moment of reflection and renewal. The world had endured a devastating conflict, but from the ashes of war, a more resilient, just, and sustainable global society was emerging. The journey was far from over, but the milestones achieved in the aftermath of World War III provided a foundation of hope and possibility for the future.